The average American got a 5.8% raise last year and saved less money than the year before. Making more money won't fix your spending. The psychology behind lifestyle creep is only the surface. What changes before the decision starts to feel inevitable? Behavioral economists call the mechanism behind this hedonic adaptation, the documented tendency of humans to return to a stable baseline of satisfaction, regardless of what their circumstances become. But there is a second layer operating underneath it, one that is specifically financial. Every time your income increases, you establish a new reference point. Behavioral economists call this anchoring. The prior salary becomes the old normal. The new salary becomes the floor, and spending adjusts upward to match the ceiling of what that new floor feels like it permits. According to research published in the Journal of Economic Psychology, households that receive a 10% income increase typically absorb 70 to 80% of that increase into new, recurring expenditures within 18 months. Not one large purchase, dozens of small recalibrations, a slightly better apartment, a slightly newer car, dining out a few more times per week, each individually justifiable, collectively permanent. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey tracks this pattern across decades. As reported by the BLS in their 2023 annual release, spending on housing, transportation, and food away from home scales nearly proportionally with income growth across most earning brackets. The categories expand together. The surplus that looked obvious from outside the new income level quietly disappears. This is the architecture of lifestyle creep. It does not arrive as one decision. It arrives as a series of reasonable ones. Here is the psychological script running in the background. Your brain is not comparing your current spending to your prior income. It is comparing your current spending to your current social reference group, the colleagues, neighbors, and feeds that your new income level has brought you into contact with. The anchor shifts, the peer set shifts, and what feels like restraint at your old salary feels like deprivation at your new one. Now here is where the trap closes, and why it is so difficult to see from the inside. The spending that lifestyle creep produces does not feel like excess. It feels like catching up. It feels like finally being able to live at the level your work deserves. Behavioral economists call this the relativity trap. We do not evaluate purchases against our absolute financial position. We evaluate them against what people like us are spending. A 2022 study from researchers at Harvard Business School found that subjective financial well-being, how wealthy people feel, is more strongly predicted by their income relative to their peer group than by their absolute income level. In other words, a person earning $60,000 surrounded by people earning $40,000 feels wealthier than a person earning $90,000 surrounded by people earning $120,000. The number matters less than the comparison. This is why promotions can feel financially destabilizing, even when they look like financial wins. The raise comes with a new professional environment. That new environment carries new reference points, lunch spots, travel standards, clothing expectations that were invisible before the title change. Your brain is doing this because it evolved to track social standing through relative consumption, not through absolute account balances. Status signaling through spending is not a modern vanity. It is a deeply embedded social cognition mechanism. According to a 2021 analysis published in the Review of Economics and Statistics, consumption that signals social position, what economists call positional spending, accounts for a measurable share of the income effect in spending increases. When income rises, a disproportionate share of new spending goes toward goods and services that are visible to others. Clothing, dining, vehicles, neighborhood. The invisible categories, savings, insurance, retirement contributions, absorb a smaller fraction. This isn't discipline, it's design. The wiring that runs the script was built for a social environment where relative standing determined survival. It was not built for compound interest. This pattern is not new, and it is not unique to any generation. In the 1950s, the phrase "keeping up with the Joneses" entered the American lexicon, precisely because economists and sociologists were documenting consumption escalation in the post-war middle class. As income rose broadly during that decade, savings rates did not rise proportionally. Spending on suburban housing, automobiles, and consumer goods expanded to absorb the gains. Veblen's earlier theory of conspicuous consumption, developed in 1899, had predicted exactly this: that spending functions partly as social communication, and that rising income raises the social communication budget alongside the savings budget, usually faster. The 2008 financial crisis offers a more recent and more precise example. According to research by Atif Mian and Amir Sufi, later published in their book House of Debt and supported by Federal Reserve data, households in zip codes that experienced the largest home equity gains during the early 2000s also showed the largest increases in non-housing consumption. Families who felt wealthier because of rising property values increased their spending on vehicles, renovations, and discretionary items, not because their incomes had risen, but because their perceived wealth position had shifted. The anchor moved. Spending followed. When the values corrected, the spending behavior had already been normalized. The recalibration downward was psychologically brutal in a way the upward adjustment had never felt. A 2009 Federal Reserve working paper documented that consumption smoothing, the economic assumption that households rationally spread spending across income fluctuations, breaks down specifically around perceived status and social positioning. People smooth upward readily. They resist smoothing downward with measurable force. The mechanism in 2008 was identical to the mechanism running quietly in every professional's bank account after a promotion. The anchor shifts. The baseline recalibrates, and the surplus that was supposed to change things gets allocated to maintaining the new normal instead. So what does understanding this actually change? It does not change the raise. It does not remove the social environment the raise brings you into. What it changes is the diagnostic. When you notice your spending has expanded to meet your new income, and you cannot quite account for where the difference went, that is not a discipline failure. That is anchoring and hedonic adaptation running exactly as designed. The script was already running before you opened your wallet. I'm Clara Voss. This is Wealth Psychology. And the thing worth sitting with is this: the pattern does not require a villain. Lifestyle creep is not the result of weakness or vanity. It is the result of cognitive architecture that was built for a different problem than wealth accumulation. Once you can name the script, it gets harder for the script to run you. Not impossible, harder. The brain that recalibrated upward can be given a second anchor. Behavioral economists call this pre-commitment. Establishing automatic transfers, savings targets, or contribution rules at the moment of a raise, before the new baseline has time to form. The intervention works not because it requires more willpower, but because it moves before the recalibration does. According to research by Richard Thaler and Shlomo Benartzi, the economists behind the Save More Tomorrow program, later cited in a 2003 paper in the Journal of Political Economy, employees who pre-committed to directing future raises towards savings showed dramatically higher retirement contribution rates than those who chose actively. The pre-commitment sidesteps the anchor. It catches the income before the lifestyle can claim it. The raise is real. The recalibration is real. And now you have a name for the mechanism that sits between them. That is the layer generic finance content always skips. The wiring behind the wallet. If this changed how you see money, subscribe for more wealth psychology stories.